right, welcome back. Session 3, One Voice. I wanted to review a little bit about what we've done so far in our video chats. The first, or I'll say the most recent video, we talked about vulnerability in storytelling. We talked about roadblocks in our creative work, vocal technique with your voice, inflection, articulation, not using as many filler words if possible. We talked about tongue twisters as a way to practice, kind of warm up your voice and wake up your voice. And if you want to send me a tongue twister, if you haven't already, please do that. It'd be fun to read it. And a story draft. I hope that you worked on a story draft. Here's my notes to remind me. The story draft, you can refer back to kind of what we did the first video session, where we talked about the 5 elements of a story. So plot, characters, conflict, setting, and theme. Feel free to send me any drafts or ideas to look over. And that's for you to call a friend to, at some point, not yet, we'll assign the partners. But you'll call your friend from class, you'll call your partner who's will be assigned by the teachers, and you'll tell them your story. And it's got to be a true personal story. Shoot for like 3 to 5 minutes, something quick. We're not asking for like a life story. But something using those elements, plot, character, conflict, setting, and theme. And I did want to just confirm, I didn't talk about body language last time, and I meant to. So you all know body language is important. And even though we're not asking you to do a video interview with your civil rights activists, and we're not asking you to do a video chat for your story project, but it really may help you to like stand up and like have big, expansive body language as needed and just close the door, no one's watching you. But it can really help you stay engaged in the story. And if you notice like an Olympian, after they finish a race, what do? Do they crawl up and say, thank you, thank you, thank you? They get really big, and that's like in our DNA. It can create a lot of confidence, and when we feel confident, we get really big. Now, sometimes, depending on your story, you might get small. You might be sick, you might be cold, you might be figuring something out. There's lots of reasons to have smaller body language. So I just encourage you to really explore that. And another thing I was going to say with the big, expansive body language, our animals, predators, get really big to scare off their prey, right? If you see a bear in the woods, you're supposed to get really big to scare them away. So just a couple of ideas for body language, since I forgot to touch on that last time. And just a reminder, you can use your story tree to create your draft. And this is all part of the My Story section. And we're going to switch over a little bit today to the Your Story section. So what am I talking about? Remember this? My story, your story, our story. The My Story is personal storytelling practice, a little bit more creative writing. Your story will be the interview focus, and that will be the focus on this video. In a very similar way to what you all said about storytelling. I know we talked about it a little bit in our last class, but interviewing can be a lot of these things too. Why do we interview? Inform, entertain, remember, process, express, connect. You see the similarities? I think they're pretty similar. But I want you to kind of come up with your own answer. Like, I know that we are assigning these interviews with the civil rights activists, but why are you interested in the interview? What is your purpose to this? And it may be different for everybody. Maybe you just want to learn a ton. Maybe you are bored and want to talk to someone new. There's lots of different ways to approach this interview, and I hope that it may not be like your number one celebrity choice that we talked about, or your great-great-great-great-great-grandparent, that, you know, when I asked the question, if you could interview anybody, who would it be? I think I said Beyonce. It may not be that person, and I know that we are assigning this person to you, and you've never met them, and it's kind of, but I want you to have fun with it. It's a conversation at the end of the day, and have fun with it. Think about what your approach will be. Okay, whether it's to inform, to educate yourself, to connect with someone new. It's a really important purpose. So a couple of ideas there. Okay, we're going to do something as our first activity. It's called a listening challenge. Now, this is a lot of fun in person, but I want you to try it with a family member. I'm going to bring up a screen in just a moment, or you'll see a screen that talks about what the listening challenge is. And it's going to be awkward, or maybe not as much because you're with a family member, But the purpose is really putting yourself out there and how you listen to someone else, but also how you talk and how you put yourself out there. And we're just getting all the nerves out before the interview. So pay attention to the screen that the screen that will pop up. You can hit pause so you can really follow the instructions. I try to really number it out for you. But it does involve one other family member. If you don't have a family member nearby, you can come back to this part. But this is just helping you get used to interviewing. So I hope that you will do it and then have fun with it and tell me how it goes, because I'm excited and curious to hear your feedback. All right, thank you. Okay, this next part will be some reflection on the listening challenge. So you can still, of course, watch this part if you didn't do the listening challenge, but I do want to just sit with what happened for a moment. A couple of questions. Was that a comfortable situation? Why or why not? Was it uncomfortable? Why or why not? What was it like compared, if you were to compare the listening part with the speaking part, which one was harder for you and why? Just so you can kind of reflect on both roles. And then speaking of listening, let's go there a little bit. Is listening an important skill? Why or why not? This is just for you to think about. You don't have to journal about it unless you want to. Totally get it if you would like to. The next question, does our culture reinforce or teach positive listening skills, and how? What I mean by culture is living in the U.S. at this time. So, our culture compared to other cultures and how we live our lives. What is the difference between listening and hearing? I don't know if you've ever had the experience where the TV is on in the background, you hear it, but are you capturing the words? Are you listening to it? So what's the difference between listening and hearing? All right, and last question, what did you notice about your body language in that activity? What did you notice about your body language in that activity? Maybe if you were uncomfortable, you were more closed body language. If you were really comfortable, if you were really expansive, you were telling your story, what you were into it, you might be in a different place with your body language. So without judgment, it's just curiosity. Where were you with your body language? Going back to that point in storytelling. I did want to talk about kind of the deeper, can be the deeper part of that exercise, building empathy. And I know that it could have been a silly story and empathy might feel serious or too serious for the challenge, the activity, but I am getting to that because these interviews that you are going to enter into next week with the calls, these are serious stories, and these are people that really risk their lives for equality. And I hope that you can build empathy in hearing their story and in how you ask them questions, how you treat them on the call, how you approach the interview. It is going to be more serious. So just kind of, putting your mindset there. So what is empathy? Let's look at that. I hope that you can enter into that space of empathy for the call, for the civil rights interview, because these are serious stories, as mentioned, and they're so important. So I'm very excited for you to explore that interview and prepare your questions. And I did want to talk about the question part. So you will see very soon, maybe before you watch this video, the questions pop up in Teams. I'm going to give 3 to 5 starter questions per person, per interview person. So you might have a couple of different ideas. I hope that you can add, I think I said at least five more questions. So you have your own intent behind those. You're welcome to send those to me through Teams. But I want you to have kind of your own say, in the experience. And your own questions. So I talked about open and closed questions in the last class that we did last week. And an open question, just to review, is something that requires maybe a little bit more story or explanation behind like yes or no. If you see investigative reporting, it's a lot of closed questions. Were you there on October 6, 1995? Yes, no. I mean, it's a lot of like drilling. And in any type of interview, you're going to have, maybe confirming questions that are closed. Closed questions are not bad, so I just want to clarify that. However, when you are getting a story, when you are getting all this new information, open questions are really strong. So my favorite phrase for a good open question is tell me about this time that you walked onto the street for your first protest. It creates a visual, it creates a feeling, an emotion, and potentially a story. So another one that's good is explain. I talked about how you can say and why or why not to add kind of more open question approach to your closed question. So maybe think about like if you were going to interview your celebrity person or your great-grandfather, whoever it was when I asked that, if you could interview anybody in the world, dead or alive, who would it be? What would your first question be? Let's say you only get one question. What would it be? So just kind of having fun with that and thinking through what are those important questions that you care about. Narrative journalism. I want to talk about this. Narrative journalism. This is something that Ira Glass has coined and come up with. He's a famous podcaster. He has done or kind of created This American Life. So it's a podcast that's been around a long time. A podcast is like a radio show. So he has this approach where you follow the plot. So it's not so black and white, and it follows the story. And he has this kind of formula where you follow the plot. See if I can do it. And then maybe you have an idea at the end or another question. It's not like, here's the answer. And it's kind of more open to interpretation, to the listener. It's kind of like when you go to an art museum and two people see the same art painting. Different people have different responses. And I like that. Narrative journalism follows the creative approach to a story. So if I'm interviewing someone about their prom date in 1950, and I found out in the conversation in real time that person they're married to now. So all of a sudden, like my brain is going to shift a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit more unscripted. You see how my questions might change in the moment. I'll still have my questions. I'll still have my list of, you'll have 10 questions ready. But in the moment, I want you to feel comfortable just following the story and asking questions as needed. And I know that's maybe a new skill that will develop over time, but have fun with it. It'll get better and more comfortable over time. I know for a lot of you, this could be your first interview, especially in this way, calling someone on the phone. You can, call one of us to practice. You can call a friend to practice. You can practice with your family member. But if you are comfortable, maybe throw in a question or two in the moment of you're just following the story, you're in the conversation, you're present, you have this empathy. So all of these skills that we've talked about, but know that you can absolutely just ask all of your questions if that is what you're more comfortable with. Just throwing it out there, extra challenge. Use these skills we talked about, empathy. You can share some of your story, why you're interested in this interview. I'll help you kind of prepare some of that language. And the next challenge for you, the only assignment after this video, is to write some questions. So based on your research, if you're interviewing Ola Hudson, Rip Patton, or Vincent Horsley, write some questions to help you kind of get into interview mode. And remember these open, closed questions. Think about how you want to sequence your questions. So, maybe you have your best question a little bit further down in the conversation, so you're more comfortable to ask that. You don't want to just spit off your best question right there in the moment. Maybe you do, but I feel like for me, it's helpful to kind of get used to the person and hear how long they go in their answers or how comfortable they are, so you can ease into it. A lot of times, especially if I'm recording and I'm doing like a podcast, I'll say, what'd you have for breakfast? Like something easy to help people like sit into the comfort of the conversation, but also it helps me get sound levels as I'm recording and figuring out the audio. So the only assignment here, as you'll see on the screen, write some questions and reach out to me as needed. Thanks so much for participating, and have such a good day.